We want to help you be the very best missionary so that you can give your very best to the people you're serving. What makes this podcast unique is it's done by missionaries for missionaries. How can we take timeless principles and apply them to our lives as missionaries? That's really our heart behind this. Welcome to this week's episode of Modern Day Missionaries. Today, we have Zach Lowrie with us. And Zach is a licensed professional counselor and one of the very first missionaries to join Modern Day way back when. I loved finding that out. And Zach and his wife, Liz, currently serve in the Netherlands. They previously served in Belgium for 6 years. And there's a gap in between those that we're going to get into today. We're going to go there. Along with their 3 boys, they're serving the local Church of Credo in Amsterdam North. And Zach uses his counseling skills to serve the church there and throughout Europe, and has a private practice and counsels people and missionaries really all over the world, helping them with their mental health and spiritual wholeness. Zach, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. It's my delight for sure.
Yeah, I loved hearing that you guys were some of the very first modern day missionaries. How fun is that?
It is fun. It really seems like not that long ago, but it 10 years ago, over just about 10 years ago, or yeah, right around there. It was just, I couldn't believe it. And of course, I've known Elias for quite a while, and even before that. So I felt like, whoa, wow, this is awesome. I'm one of the first. I'm on the top of the bottom of the pile, I guess, and it's awesome. I feel very privileged to be in
Yes.
relationship. Yeah.
You beat us. You guys joined even before we did. I think we joined not long afterwards, but we actually just got to meet for the first time really recently. So that's kind of fun that we get. It's fun to meet people who serve on the same team. And I know my husband Danny and I both got to meet you, and we were struck by your story, and just how much we enjoyed you as a person. And so I'm pumped to have you today because you're a counselor and you're a missionary. So you have a really unique perspective, I think, to share with everybody today. And when you were, you were opening up about some of your story the other day, and I thought, okay, there are some themes in here that we've got to dig into on the podcast because they're common not only to the human experience, but also especially to the missionary experience. Some of those themes of confusion and disappointment and trust and transition and all of that. Themes like, God, I trust you, but what are you doing right now?
I'm happy to say that I'm in a healthy place to be able to talk about these
Yeah.
dark moments without experiencing the same kind of pain that I had in those moments.
Yeah, which is great. It's great to be able to share from those from a place of clarity. Obviously, when you're right in the middle of it, it's hard sometimes to see where you're at. When you get a little bit out, yeah, there's a lot of lessons that you can mine from that. And so that's where we're going to go today. Look at those seasons and those moments of confusion and disappointment and those seasons of waiting and not knowing, and really look at how we can live them well and live them intentionally. And I know I mentioned earlier that you and your family served in Brussels. So why don't you back us up to that point? What were you doing in Brussels? And then you can share a little bit of
Yeah.
the upheaval you experienced when things suddenly changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Stephanie, I can recall being a young man seeing the opportunity to be a missionary as something that I felt like that's for me, right? I want to be a part of the mission field. I want to do something like that with my life. Of course, we often can talk about these things and dream about these things when they become a reality at your front door and you have to make decisions to actually do it. It can be very challenging and surreal and I would say scary for sure. But it was 2008. I took my first trip to the Brussels area. I was a part of a youth convention playing. I was a musician playing backup guitar. I wasn't even the first option. I just was available, and yeah, sure, why not? Let's just try this. Um, and there was something just unique about this moment that I hadn't experienced. I'd been to several places before that, um, but I didn't have the same kind of personal experience that I had in this moment. And me, along with a few of the other individuals I was with, we just found ourselves at a place just talking about what could the Lord do with us in this nation of Belgium. And so I began to get excited. We came home. I came home to my wife, and she also was excited. It seemed the Lord had been speaking to her and the wives of the individuals I was with there, and we were all excited about this. So then it was about a 2-year process before we moved to Belgium, praying and meeting and strategizing. We had a couple of objectives to start a house of prayer and a discipleship school there in Brussels. And so Thanksgiving week of 2010, we were set out to move to Belgium. Now, of course, we planned. This is what we'll do. This is how we'll do it. We all came from the same church, the group that we moved with. So, you know, raising support, 3 families from the same community might be challenging. It was challenging. And uh, so my wife had a unique opportunity as she worked for a company that had an office inside the Brussels area. And we just took a shot. Let's just ask. So we asked, can she transfer? And they said, absolutely. That's no problem at all. So we found ourselves in a different situation with a different kind of visa. Um, and so then setting up, moving out, a week before we move, um, her immediate oversight, her supervisor says, when you land, your department will not exist. And so we had made all these plans, set all this agenda, budgeted, did this, did that, did, all of this stuff. You planning to do all your due diligence. And well, we land in Brussels and she goes to interview for another position in the company, in that office. Uh, she got the job, and 2 days later, she flew out for a conference in Spain, and our whole lives changed. What we had
Wow.
planned for her to be a working mother from home, uh, now became she was in the office she was on the train from 7:30 in the morning till 6:45 in the evening, and I became Mr. Mom, doing all of the prep for the kids at school and all this stuff. It was a radical shift, Stephanie, that proved to be pretty challenging for that first year, 2 years, where I'm wondering if we got it right. Was this really what God wanted us to do? And we just persevered, pressed through. My whole time in that moment was, a challenge for me personally as I began to think about what my role in life was going to be, and tried to really find the benefit of the situation being unique, a father being able to be a stay-at-home dad. I'd never had that experience before, and that's where we were. So served, established our goals where we uh, we um, we accomplished our goals, and I started plugging into a local church and transitioned to be involved in music ministry, and was the music pastor there at this church, and started to love it. Stephanie, we were living our dream as missionaries, and things were going well. Well, in Belgium, you're required to renew your visa or your ID cards every year at the same
Hmm.
time. And if you do that consecutively for 5 years, you can apply for what they have as a green card, and you don't need sponsorship. Well, that fifth year, the year we're thriving, we're dreaming long term. I mean, we're going to retire. Our kids are speaking French. We're all going to. I mean, this is all just wonderful.
It's
We
coming.
go.
It's reaching a pinnacle.
Yes.
You're at the moment.
Oh,
Year
oh my goodness.
5.
We're loving life. I get a phone call in July of 2015. My wife says, "Hey, I've got good news and bad news." I said, "Oh wow, okay." She said, "The good news is I will be able to stay with you boys for the rest of the summer. I can be at home all day, every day for the rest of the summer." And I thought, okay, that's really awesome. What is the bad news? She said, "The bad news is my contract has been terminated and I've been let go.
Gosh.
So this began a year of incredible, uh, um, just some of the most painful disappointment that I would experience in my life, where we begin trying, pleading, asking, begging, is there a way, God, for us to be able to live here still? When we went to apply for our ID card, they denied our request because we didn't have employment, and they said, "You must leave the country." And it was, Stephanie, just devastating, sadness, pain. I felt a sense of betrayal in there from from some ministry individuals, anger, right, frustration, all of just the whole emotional wheel, just everything, just and it was challenging for sure. So 2016, July of 2016 was our transition back to Texas, off the field, despite not wanting to be back home at all.
And Zach, I appreciate you sharing this because I think this story is so relatable. There are so many people I have talked to who had to leave the field not by choice, but they got
Mm,
dragged off. I mean, I that was part of our story I know as well. We had 0 plans of
mhm,
serving and having our base be here in the US. Our plan was to continue to stay in Peru, and some of those feelings I think that you feel and those questions you ask yourself, you're like, Lord, there are so few people who are willing to go do mission work. Like, there's not a lot of us. We are like
right,
a very select crew. So you can feel like, Lord, why would you take us out? I mean, this doesn't make sense. Wouldn't you want us there? What were some of the
absolutely.
questions that went through
Oh,
your
yeah,
guys' mind?
absolutely. It was the constant challenge of thoughts taking me to a place of, are we failures? Did we do something wrong? Are we in sin? Why are we suffering the consequence of this? I'm wanting to prove to the state of Belgium, hey, I will not be a burden on the state. So please just grant us the access to seek employment without sponsorship, because there's a whole different world of, you can just find a job that will take you, and you have to have sponsorship from an employer. So all of these just thoughts were there of just grieving, or just being sad and frustrated. My wife went on interviews, for 3, 4 months. She was just looking for a job. And every one of those employers, it was difficult because they would need to at least sponsor one more year, um, and pay taxes on that, which was difficult and challenging. So yeah, just looking for a way, just, clawing and treading, just trying to find, where is the light here that we can where's the door that's available for us to remain in here, because we didn't want to leave. We didn't want to move.
Right, right. And like you said, you're asking those questions.
Hmm.
Is it us? Did we do something wrong? So there's the personal side. Or then you're saying, okay, is this God? Is God taking us off? And there's a
Hmm.
purpose here that I don't see? Or is this attack of the enemy and we just need to push through? And is he trying to
Yeah.
derail us? And I think that leaning into that why can really trip us up sometimes. And not that it's not good to
Yeah.
examine it. I mean, it is good to ask God, hey, is there something here I should be seeing that I don't know? But when we get stuck and don't move beyond the why, we do get stuck. I mean, that stuck is the
Sure.
word. So what was it
Sure.
like for you guys? How did you lean into the what versus the why?
Yeah. I think ultimately it felt very confusing as to why, we're believing what we're asking for is a good thing, right? We serve a good God and we're doing good work, and everything is good, right? And so in that moment, we're consumed with just dwelling on the truth of, it's all good. So why is there a no? Why is there a closed door? And really, I think that's where my personality plays into it. Where I'm looking internally constantly, just asking these questions about, what is it that I'm not seeing? What is it that I'm not asking? Am I asking the wrong request? Am I praying the wrong thing? Stephanie, there was a moment of January of 2016. I remember entering into a moment where I wanted to pray and fast to see a breakthrough and or just at least to understand God's perspective on this. And I called my father and I said, Dad, will you pray? I have these 3 requests here. Will you pray this? We're asking for this or this option. And he said, Zach, I will pray with you. I'll fast with you. He said, but I'm going to ask God for something else. I'm going to ask that he'll show you something that perhaps you're not seeing that he sees. And I remember him explaining that to me and just being, no, Dad, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear another perspective. I want to hear this because it was a moment of frustration at myself or a moment of frustration at somebody else. I wanted to blame, right? I just
Blame.
find a
That is
reason.
what we want
Yes,
to do. You're so right.
yes. And so I hate to admit sometimes that my dad's right because that's the way we are, we always want to, you're not right. That's not true, but he was right. There was a whole nother realm of opportunity and possibilities that I hadn't even considered in that moment because the door closing was so intense for me to understand and see the future like that. But you can't see the future. We're not able to do that. So the whys and the whats, I wasn't ready to think about what it is that I needed to do differently or what it is that's going to happen. And I wasn't ready to embrace that. I was still consumed with why is it happening to me? All of this is good. Why is it happening?
I appreciate your honesty in saying that because it's true that it is difficult. We know we need to get to the what, but the
Hmm.
why can be so loud. It just
Yes.
emotionally screams at you, and and that wanting to assess blame again. Do I blame myself? Do I blame God? Do I blame the enemy? Do I blame people? It just feels
Yeah.
not right. Sometimes we can lean into self-righteousness. As you were talking, it made me think, I remember the first time in my life when I had that sense of this is unjust and what is going
Right.
on, God. I was 16 years old. I just got my driver's license and I was driving on my way to work and I got in a car accident. I thought somebody was turning and they weren't. And it
Mm.
was my fault. But what I remember is I was praying on the way to work, praising God. I was singing like a praise song. I was praying, and I felt so deeply offended. Like, God,
Yeah.
I was praying. I got in a car accident in the middle of praying. This isn't right. And I
Yes.
think for those of us
Yes.
serving on the field, sometimes there is that God, I am doing your work. I am doing the thing that no one else will do. This
Right.
should not be happening to me. And it's almost a sense of offense or frustration. And obviously, each personality interacts with that differently. But there is
Right.
some commonality in what is happening, Lord. Some frustration
Right.
with Him, even in the midst of trust.
Yeah.
There can be frustration.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was absolutely devastating thoughts about self, ministry, God's plan. You know, how are you letting the enemy win? How are you allowing this to happen? How are you allowing me to experience pain and sadness like this? And it was significant during that moment for us. Yeah.
So I have a question for you along that,
Yeah.
Zach. So the why phase, as much as we know we need to move on, it's pretty unavoidable. It's
Hmm.
all it almost is. So what is a healthy way for somebody to interact with why? And how do they
Yeah.
keep it from going on too long?
Yeah. Well, I do I do ascribe to this reality that God uses disappointment and loss for a moment to understand something. And I would say that there's not a situation where God creates this to inflict pain, right? Um, but we all have been created with the capacity to experience sadness, to experience anger, to experience disappointment, and it can be incredibly healthy to walk through these seasons of disappointment, asking the questions of why. But in a sense, your goal is isn't trying to remove sadness or remove frustration or remove disappointment. Your goal is just really to try to understand why it is so frustrating to begin with. Why is this disappointment hitting me in the place that it is so hard? And in this moment, I really see the opportunity for you to get to know yourself in a whole new way and get to know how God is with you in the midst of the intense, disappointing moment. You know, Stephanie, we encounter loss and disappointment every day of our lives sometimes. It just varies in the degree of intensity, right? You go to pour yourself some cereal and you pour the cereal and you go to the fridge to get the milk and there's not any milk. Well, that's disappointing, right? I mean, on a very elementary scale for sure. But you get the idea. It's, we encounter this all the time. And so these severe moments of disappointment or loss, we can ask the question why. God's not afraid of that. God's not afraid of our irritation or our frustration. It doesn't throw him off the throne. I think it's important that we're able to understand ourselves as we mature, as we grow. We're able to understand his presence with us in the midst of disappointment and loss. Um, so yeah, the things that you can really utilize are those perspectives of, all right, let me look inside. Let me be honest with what I feel. I'm not trying to remove it or change it as much as I'm trying just to understand it. Right.
Trying to
Uh,
understand
so
it, and that
yes.
why. Okay, love that you're shifting the why there, not so much leaning into why is this happening, but why is this hitting me so hard?
Right.
And that's powerful
Right.
because we all know that different people experience crises in different ways. Some people are derailed by something, some people are just dust themselves off and keep going. So looking at your own experience, maybe it's your personality, maybe it's your past, um,
Hmm.
your threshold for pain, all those things. What about this experience, or what about me, is
Hmm.
causing me to interact with this disappointment in such an intense way? So, how did that play
Absolutely.
out for you personally?
It really created an opportunity for me to look at what I'm expecting life to look like. You know, uh, I I don't want to pretend as though I can have everything figured out, everything planned, and I'm certainly not advocating for us to not plan or not schedule or have an idea, goals, right, for the future. But at the same time, being willing to understand that things can shift and things can change. Loss is, I'm almost ready to promise that it's guaranteed to happen in life, right? You develop, you grow, relationships change, your job changes. Uh, so I think really being able to understand the shelf is a good place to look. And for me in that moment, it was it was really just over what Lord, what do you want for me that's next? One of the things that when we transitioned from the field was I remember thinking, if I am so concentrated on being irritated and upset about what didn't happen, I'm going to miss the opportunity to see what God wants to do for whatever is next for me in the next season. So if I sit there and wait, if I'm we call it ruminating, right? In the mental health world, ruminating on what was not going to happen. You're going to miss out on some things. And I was able to really analyze, are my expectations reality? Am I thinking in right perspectives here? Am I going where I need to go? You know, believing that God is good and He's taking me places. He's leading me. Scripture talks about Him setting boundaries for us in Acts, um, and it's in Him that we move and live and have our being. And so I see this as a really massive, insurmountable moment where my boundary is being moved, and I can learn from it in that moment.
What important questions you're bringing up right now as you're talking about self-examination, looking at yourself,
Hmm.
what is my relationship to God right now? How do I
Right.
relate to pain? You said another one I forgot that I just really enjoyed, but just leaning into where am I at? How can I do this better?
Hmm.
Am I on the right
Yeah.
path? Is there something else I should be doing? Might be some other questions we could ask ourselves in those moments of self-examination?
Yeah. Um, I think really being aware of the opportunity for faith to be matured in this moment, so that it's not a crisis of whether God is good or not, or God is real or not, or God is present, but exactly what is God doing, Uh, the moment that you can't have what you want, but you're not going to entertain this idea that there's something wrong with faith, or there's something wrong with God on a deeper level, or something wrong with you, to be honest. But just that things aren't going the way you expected them to go. And honestly, this is a common crisis in a lot of people's lives that I deal with on a clinical level. People have a certain mode of expectation, and you can ask yourself, is there something in my expectation? Is there something in the way that I talk to myself? It has to be this, or it has to be that. Um, that can be unhealthy, or cross into that threshold of being actually detrimental for your mental health. Um, so yeah, it's good. It's such a good thing to continue to live in seasons of reanalyzing, reassessing where you are in your thought process, and understanding yourself, and understanding your relationship with the Lord. Um, so um, I think I think that you will experience loss. There will be moments where you can grieve this loss. I remember just having no time to cry, no time to reflect on the sadness until after we had moved back to Texas, because we had 60 days to leave the country. So I'm throwing blankets over my wife and the kids are already back in Texas, and I'm closing shop. I'm throwing blankets and pillows and clothing and toys. We gotta pack it all up. I gotta take it over to this place and get rid of it. And I couldn't just sit there and just grieve, you know, um, and feel that loss, and think about these kinds of things. And I think that was really hard. And it went into the season when we lived in Texas for a few more months and a couple of years. And so it was just a really hard time, but an important time to understand for yourself, you know, um, and important moments to really reflect on whether or not your expectations are real for yourself, are good and healthy and moving in the right place, you know? Um,
Yeah, and bringing up expectations, that was the one I was trying to think of earlier that you'd mentioned that I love, the resetting of expectations, and sometimes we
yeah.
just think either they need to be super high and in perfect 100% amazing faith and
Mhm.
be believing for everything to be perfect, or we can just crash them to the ground and go, "I have no expectations. Whatever happens just happens." And neither one of
Yeah.
those is really a healthy approach. I like to call myself a
Mhm.
positive realist. So I like to go into
Mhm.
things with high hopes, and yet with realistic expectations. Always believing that God can do miracles, that He has good things for our family. But I think the reality piece comes into we live in a world, and it's a broken world, and it's a world where
Right.
people do things, and weather happens, and governments change,
Right.
and we're not seeking for perfection. And that doesn't mean that we're negative, to be realistic, but
Right.
also it's mixing that with the hope that God wants us to have. And neither ditch brings us to a good place. So it's putting
Right.
it before the Lord and going, "Lord, show me what to expect and show me what expectation even means. How am I
Right.
interpreting that word expectation? Is it like a
Very
black and
true.
white, it's my way or the highway? Am I putting my hope in things, or am I putting my hope in you? But until
Very
we reach
true.
a crisis point, we often don't ask ourselves those kind of questions.
Absolutely. That was something as I'm reflecting for us in our time here. I would love to get you to a place that you are well prepared for the most devastating loss. But the truth is that we can only prepare so much. And each moment of disappointment is a unique situation and experience that it is incredibly challenging to to think about yourself in a moment of great loss and disappointment, thinking about a checklist. Okay, what can I do now? All right, I feel better. But you each moment is a of loss and disappointment is an experience all unique to its own, and it's difficult to fight through the intense emotion, to come away with a rational checklist of things. All right, here I'm good. I'm good here. I'm good here. I'm good here. It requires work. It requires time. And and so that is very true about just thinking rationally through these moments.
Well, and I like what you
As
just
it
said
can be,
there too about that difficulty of seeing, that difficulty of
yeah,
knowing. And it reminded me what you said earlier about your dad. It's so critical to have people who can see when we can't see. And unlike Job, you know, not
yeah,
not not
right,
bring in friends who will swing you to one ditch or the other, but to find those healthy people who go, "Okay, you can't see this right now, but I
Mhm.
love you and I can see some things. Can I speak into your life?" And it's scary sometimes to invite people into that process. What kind of people
Absolutely.
did you guys have join you in that process during that time?
Yeah, we were grateful that we had established relationships in the community in Belgium that we had that sent us off well, sent us back to Texas well. They were very empathetic, and they understood, and they were grieving with us. They were sad with us for these decisions. When we arrived back in Texas, we still had our lifelong friendships that were established there, and we just kind of almost like pulled a seat right up to the table where they were and joined them at the dinner table as though we had never left. And so they welcomed us right back into their little small group communities. I think ultimately though, just having those friends is such a valuable entity. And the temptation really is when you're in a moment of maybe intense sadness to isolate and step away and to not participate and to change life. But I do want to offer that as a practical encouragement that uh, you will do far better for yourself by engaging despite not having that motivation or believing this isn't going to do anything. Forcing yourself to do it will put you in a better place than if you engage in isolation and loneliness and just, oh, I'm too sad to do it. Right. So if you're looking at which one is, both of them are hard, which one is better? The one that you will force yourself to be engaged, but having a community is very important. And I would say if you struggle to find the trust or the authenticity to talk to somebody, find a professional who you can meet with who's neutral, has no context, right? But you can bring in to talk about these things that are very real,
Yeah.
and very hard.
Absolutely, and on that note, I know there are people listening thinking, "How can I get a hold of Zach?" So I know that you do counseling. How could people get a hold of you if that's something they'd like to, find more about?
Yeah, well, we do have a link on a modern day there where you can get in contact with us. I think it's connected to my email. I'm not sure, but either way, you can contact me, zach.lowrie.lpc@gmail.com. You can send me an email. I'll be happy to talk with anybody. I would give my phone number right here, but I don't know how many
Don't
how
do
many
it.
people are gonna. Yeah, I won't do it. I'm an open book, right? So if you're
You're too
hurting,
nice.
you give me a call. We're gonna find a way to connect. Um, but please, maybe in the show notes or the podcast notes, you can
Absolutely.
you can leave my contact info there, my email at least, and we can get in touch. That I understand these deep moments, especially in the mission field, or some things not going the way you want them to go, and it is challenging. You don't know when it's going to end. You don't know when that pain is going to be over. I've been there, and so I understand that, and so yeah,
And like you
yeah,
said, in the show notes, we are going to have all of your information there, Zach, and anything that we discussed today.
perfect.
As we close out, any other things you'd like to leave us with, resources, things that people can dig into if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I would say that you will encounter loss, you will have disappointments in life, um, and I would just say that if after these disappointments, if sadness and the pain is lingering for longer than 6 to 8 weeks at an intense level, please do not wait any longer. Go talk to somebody, reach out to a professional. It doesn't have to be me um, um, or anything like that. But I would absolutely encourage you to don't dismiss the seasons of hardship as just, oh, it's the devil or it's a spiritual attack. There's something you can learn and you can glean from knowing yourself in this moment, writing things down. And I would leave you with that.
And on the other side, once we've walked through it, the beauty is we become these rich, deep people, this deep well, I think that can actually serve the people we serve
Hmm.
even better if we can weather these wells.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for taking the
Absolutely.
time to share all of not only your story, but then some of the lessons that you've mined through that, Zach. I know that was really beneficial to everybody
Yeah.
who listens
My
today. So
pleasure.
thanks. And to all of you who are listening, definitely make sure to tune on into the podcast next week when we're here for our next episode. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any of them. And if you have any questions about what we talked about today or any ideas for future episodes, send us an email at care@modernday.org. We will see you on our next episode.